Hello everybody, I'm Àlex, CEO and founder of MarsBased, and in this episode we bring you John Nolan from Ghost, the company behind the popular open source newsletter and blogging platform that we have used here and there at MarsBased. I have used extensively as my personal website over the years. My founder-to-founder newsletter nowadays is built on Ghost. And with John, we discuss many things that we have got in common as a company: the transparency, the core values, remote work, bootstrapping, but also some particularities they've got. And they are a foundation. It's a kind of company that cannot be sold. They will not be able to take the usual investment that other companies might be entitled to. We speak about the future. We also talk about their technological stack, and we dive a little bit deep into the technical intricacies of their product, particularly regarding rewrites, technical depth, and so on. And the question of the day for this episode will be, what newsletter platform do you use for your company? At MarsBased, we're considering switching over from MailChimp to something else, and your answers will be particularly helpful. And so without further ado, let's jump right into this episode. Good, I think this is recording. You don't look very nervous. How are you doing, John? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Seems like you're used to this.
Not my first podcast, but I'm sure it will be the best.
You look more of a professional podcast recorder than I do, so it seems like you're very used to this. I think it's part of the remote setup, right?
Yeah, that's right. After a while, you get used to trying to have a nice setup and making video calls feel good.
I wish my team could hear this so that they also bought the nice cameras and mics, and they don't have to be using these setups that introduce a lot of echo into the calls and stuff like that. Good. I have so many questions. Been using Ghost for 10 years on and off. I have to say that my journey has been interesting with the platform. I remember trying it too early. But more recently, I have rediscovered it as a personal user. I recreated my website. Every 2 years, I've got this thing where I rebuild my personal website with a different framework. And I was eager to do it with Ghost this time around. I have to say, there's something in it that gave me the wow impression every step of the way. I think you guys nail it. And so here goes my gratitude and my, I'm super impressed by it. How
Appreciate
much of
that.
this is affected by the fact that you're a bootstrap company, independent company, and that you can take however long it takes to polish all the details?
Well, I think it is affected by us being a bootstrapped company, but not necessarily because we can take all the time to polish the details. We have a lot of competitors, pretty big ones. I think the smallest has $50 million of funding and the largest has $1.1 billion of funding. And people, as in end users, don't particularly care if we're bootstrapped and independent. They just want to use the best product, right? So if we took all the time in the world to just polish everything and make it perfect, we simply wouldn't be able to keep up with the expectations that people have from products like Ghost. But that said, I think being independent and bootstrapped allows us to have more focus, allows us to optimize for different things, allows us to take different strategic moves than we might otherwise if we had investors who were pushing for growth targets.
Exactly. I take it that companies like Basecamp, Ghost, Buffer, that you're more well known for being highly opinionated, bootstrapped or semi-bootstrapped. You can take more time to polish this, and I know you're right. I grant you that. Like, you don't have all the time in the world. However, you are aware of a subset of users that they will buy your product, whatever it takes. Like, they don't really care about, maybe there's a better competitor, maybe there's a cheaper alternative, but I will buy your product because of your values, your vision, and I'm totally aligned with your product. Like, for instance, in our company, MarsBased, we created the company because we read the books of Basecamp. And so for 10 years, we were paying for that product. And we knew there was better software out there, but we said, like, thanks to Rails, thanks to Basecamp, we're here and now, right? So it took really long for us to kind of like get rid of Basecamp when it was, unavoidable that we had to use other products. But I find myself using products because I really believe in the vision, right? So have you calculated how much of a percentage of your user base is this fanatical user base that will pay for your product, whatever you do, or not really?
Haven't calculated the percentage. I think that might be quite difficult to do. There's definitely some people who are very passionate about Ghost based on structure and values, and that's a really important part of how we do things. I think the killer combination, though, is if you can combine the two. If you can have great structure and values as well as a great product, I think then you're really on to something, right? I think of products outside or companies outside of the tech space with things like this, right? So like Patagonia is the classic example.
Exactly.
People are aligned with their values. People buy Patagonia stuff because of their values. But if they made, crappy t-shirts that fell apart after a while, then it wouldn't be what it is today. It's the quality and the care that goes into the product combined with the values that I think is where the magic can happen if you get it right.
Exactly. Well, you mentioned it. You created a brand, and one of the things about creating a brand is people will follow it more strongly than anything else. People will be, or user base will be less volatile, if you will. But that doesn't happen on day one. That doesn't happen on day 10. Are you aware of the day where that happened, when you made the click and you started getting it right, everything you made, and you started attracting this subset of users, the cult-like users that we were talking about before? Are you aware of the precise moment or movement you did in the company that kind of turned the direction in the company into the right way?
Yeah, I think Ghosts is an unusual case where it did happen on day one. And that's partially to do with the origin story of the company, which kind of started as just this blog post pitch of what I wanted to exist in the world and the values that I thought it should have. And so the values for the company existed before the product, before the company. They existed as an idea and a concept that I put out into the world. And so it was actually that captured people's attention as much as the idea for the product itself. So as we went from blog post to Kickstarter to the first launch, the consistent story that came along with Ghost was that we were doing this for love, not for profit, doing this for values, not for growth. And that was a huge part in the launch, and then also a huge part in the continued growth that came afterwards.
Exactly. One of the things that really resonates with me is it's very similar to Basecamp's Until the End of the Internet, right? The fact that you are a foundation, I think, is something that stands out. You're a different kind of company, not only legally, but also existentially. If you create a company that you cannot sell, you will not do things that will drive you towards selling the company, right? And so you operate differently. Beyond the obvious consequences of running a foundation that might not be obvious for 99% of the users of the internet, but in terms of governance, in terms of leadership, have you found, for instance, any restrictions of things you wanted to do, something that has held you back because you were a foundation, perhaps like you wanted to run faster, which is, I don't believe it's in your ethos as a company, but what things did you find out along the way that were, this is holding me back?
Yeah, there's a bunch of weird non-profit regulations and things that you get surprised by, and every country kind of has their own set of them. So they'll be slightly different depending on where you are in the world. The one that comes to mind always immediately is if you're incorporated as a non-profit foundation, you are automatically classified by banks and financial institutions as high risk, which is fairly logical. Like most non-profits are dependent on outside funding, typically don't sustain their operations without some kind of outside help. So do you really want to lend money to an organization that may be not able to pay it back? As a bank, probably not. But it's a blanket rule. So for example, a common thing that software startups do is they put their hosting bills, which are usually quite extensive, on American Express cards. And the benefit of that is you get a delayed time frame for paying your hosting bills, but you also rack up a huge number of air miles and points and things that you can use elsewhere. Amex won't talk to us. They say, "Oh, you're a nonprofit." Yeah, no, you're disqualified. And same with banks. We haven't ever needed lending facilities, but if we did, they're not available. Banks won't give you any lines of credit as a nonprofit organization. So the flexibility there is something that has kind of inhibited us a little bit. And a second one would be in a similar vein, like all the bookkeeping and accounting and everything for nonprofits is much more complex. And because it's less common, it's much harder to find accountants who understand what it is they're supposed to do. If you show up in the US with a normal C Corp, in the UK with a normal limited company, any accountant can help you out and do the normal thing that they do for all companies. But when you're a nonprofit, it's a lot harder to find anyone who understands what it is that they're supposed to do and you're supposed to do and how it should all work. So finding partners and suppliers on the kind of legal, financial side in general is a lot more challenging. That's probably the biggest hurdle.
Well, one of the good things about running a nonprofit, and I created one in the past, is that people will help you for free because they believe in the vision, right? So that's something that maybe not at the level that I will do this multi-million financial bookkeeping for you, but maybe, somebody will introduce you to this other person that will do free consultation and this, or lend you some sort of services for free because it's a nonprofit. And therefore you will also get some kind of, I don't know if you need it, but like donations or sponsorships by companies that you wouldn't get otherwise, because big corporations, most of the times they have these budgets allocated for nonprofits and social responsibility and stuff like that. I don't know if that's the case, but if you wanted to run faster, and again, I don't think this is the path to follow for Ghost, but you've gone from under $1 million in annual revenue around 2019, 2020, if I remember correctly, to public numbers you posted 1 month ago, 7 million in annual revenue, right? So if you really believed in the long-term vision and adopting a larger and broader user base by adding more money to the machine, right? What financial levers could you use for that? Seeing that loans not available, VC money not available, maybe cash in the bank. Like, what else is there?
There's not much. It sounds like you've either had better luck than I have, or you have better friends than I do. Both is possible. But no, we've never had any donations from corporations that have a budget for giving money to nonprofits. Never once. And we get almost nothing for free. In fact, we have to pay for pretty much everything. It's very uncommon that we'll get totally free services. I think the biggest one is probably our GitHub account, where we have a GitHub Pro account that they give for free to open source maintainers. But we do get generous discounts from some suppliers, but not as many as you would think. To some extent, there isn't really much in the way of levers that you can pull. Of course, all investors are looking for some sort of return on investment, right? Which usually means they need to own part of the company, which means shares. Nonprofits don't have shares, so investors are not so interested. I do get 2 or 3 emails from VCs every single week who have done enough research to see that Ghost is a fast-growing tech platform and express their interest in investing, but not enough research to understand that we're a nonprofit and can't take investment, which is always quite amusing. So I often reply and say, we're a nonprofit, but donations are welcome. And to date, I've never had a reply beyond that point. That's weird, right?
That's where you lose them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Really strange.
We also get. Sorry, go ahead.
There are funding sources there are bodies that do grant funding in various places. The highest concentration is in the US, but we're not a US company. So it turns out US foundations that fund other nonprofits and do philanthropic work typically have either regulation-driven or investor-driven or partner-driven limitations on where they're allowed to distribute funds, and that's almost always domestically. So there's not an opportunity for us there right now. So in some ways, it's been an advantage. It's been a forcing factor for us to build a sustainable business, to build a revenue stream that makes us 0% dependent on any source of outside funding and make sure that we can sustain our operations regardless of anyone else's support. And that's been a good thing for the long-term health of the business, but it's definitely been a limiting factor. The speed at which we're able to move right now is limited by how many developers we can afford to hire, and that's limited by how fast revenue grows. And it's been slow but consistent growth for about 11 years, and we just grow at the pace we're able to.
Actually, one funny thing is we also get VCs trying to invest in MarsBased. We're a service-based company. It doesn't really make sense, but I guess that when you automate your email outreach, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Second, the best investors in the world are well known for doing nothing with their investments and just sitting it out. And so it really makes sense. It would be a very good investment, return on investment, to invest in something like sustainable growth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, and you know it also very perfectly, is lifestyle businesses, like for instance mine. We are regarded as unambitious, right? That's something I get all the time when I visit Silicon Valley. Is like, why don't you do something more ambitious? Why don't you raise funds or like merge with another company, start like hiring like crazy and triple your size every year and stuff like that? It's like, I really don't want to do that. Like, who can really assure me that I will not grow to 200 people in 1 year and then go back to 100 in the next year, right? I don't want to be an accordion company. And we've seen plenty of those in the VC-backed world and in companies relying and believing in hypergrowth. That's something that we're not really fond of. I'm much more leaning towards the side of lifestyle and sustainable and slow growth business. 20% a year. It's really good. 20, 25, 30 on a good year. It's really good for 10 years now. I'll take it any day. Pay dividends and stuff like that. Team is happy, pay good salaries. But I think that's not the mantra around the tech scene, that perhaps we have lost the narrative. And I'd like to see the tables turn, but I don't think this is happening anytime soon. Look, by now, I think we've lost 100% of the developers that were listening to the podcast talking about nonprofits and financial jargon. So I wanted to have a couple of more technical questions before delving into the vision and the other topics that I wanted to cover in the podcast, more like product and strategy, right? But the technical ones for the developer bait here is you chose a tech stack based on Node.js. I don't know if you can tell us why and whether that was the original tech stack or has it changed and evolved over the years?
Yeah, no, that was the original tech stack. We picked Node.js when it was at version 0.10 back in 2013. So Node was in its mostly hype, not really proven stage. And we'd started building the front end of Ghost in JavaScript. And at some point we thought, well, what if the whole thing was JavaScript? And just started exploring that idea. The obvious benefit would be that it would be incredibly fast. And the tangential benefit, which people used to say a lot more at the time than they do now, was that you could have your full stack written in a single language. That was an advantage that was pitched of Node.js at one point. Though I think at this point, front end and back end have sufficiently diverged that it's almost irrelevant that they're both JavaScript. So it was a little bit of a bet. It was a punt on a new technology that seemed very promising. And it worked out. Part of the attraction of Ghost when we launched was that it was using this new technology. It was very, very fast, and that's what attracted people to it. The disadvantage of choosing Node.js was that it was so young. It was a very, very immature ecosystem. And for the most part, up until relatively recently, people really weren't building full stack web applications with Node. So there was quite a lot in the way of NPM packages for making APIs and microservices, but almost nothing when it came to building, a full web app with Node.js, because it just wasn't the popular use case. So most of the types of things that we needed to build for Ghost, we couldn't just pull in a dependency or a package for to help. We had to write it ourselves. We had Express to basically give us roots and views. But other than that, we kind of had to invent everything from scratch. And that's that's been a real challenge over the years. I think our pace of development has been slowed versus if we had picked something like Laravel or Rails that are so well engineered, so well designed for doing exactly what Ghost does. Whereas with Node, we kind of had to invent a lot of our patterns, or essentially all of our patterns from scratch. And that's just taken a lot more time.
But maybe because you had to develop it yourself, you could continue being so opinionated as a company. Like, now that we have to develop this framework for doing this exact functionality, we're going to build it the way we want it to be, right? I don't know if that's the case, or you have any specific examples about that.
You would think, but no, kind of the opposite. I think
you have to say yes.
It's lovely to imagine that if you have the ultimate freedom to build whatever you want, that you will make better decisions and come up with a better architecture than something like Rails or Laravel. But in reality, we were focused on delivering the product to users, and whatever code needed to be written to deliver the value to our customers that were needed is the code we ended up writing. And some of that was good code, and some of it is what you would now describe as technical debt. It was not good code. And we grew Ghost as a product while Node.js was growing as a piece of technology. And a lot of the fundamental building blocks that are now common in Node.js-based apps just simply didn't exist in 2013. So there's a lot of cruft, there's a lot of stuff that we don't love about our code base, and there's a lot of bits of frameworks that I really don't think anyone's excited about writing. Like an ORM. In Node.js, ORM is like one of the great unsolved problems that isn't a good one. There's a bunch of old ones. There's a couple that are some sort of enterprise startup play, but there isn't an equivalent to Active Record or Eloquent that's well maintained, that is performant, and that's compatible with the way most people build web apps. So yeah, I don't know. It's been a big disadvantage not having that, and now we're kind of 10, 11 years later in the place of trying to refactor and extract some of the fundamental parts of the app into something that resembles more of a framework, but that's a very slow process.
That is a perfect assist and very timely. I was going to go into technical depth. So how many have you had to rewrite certain parts of the product or do a full rewrite over the course of this decade?
No, I'm a big believer in a full rewrite is never the answer. There's a good Joel Spolsky post on that I think has aged very well and continues to be relevant. We have had to evolve and update parts of the architecture as we've grown, but we always try our best to do that incrementally. I think it rarely makes sense to pursue a refactor project, which doesn't have a clear customer-based goal that it's aiding, just a developer-based goal of making the code nicer. So we try and always focus things around, why do we need to refactor? Is it because we're blocked on adding a new feature? Is it because performance has become too slow? Is it because stability or downtime is being affected by this piece of code which is poorly tested and it's difficult to test? And as we do that, we kind of replace, upgrade, move around the pieces of the app that feel like they're causing the most problems, but it's always aligned with a customer problem or a user problem that we're trying to solve.
And how do you approach technical debt in the company now that you mention it? Do you have it as a KPI internally? Some companies have got it as a business KPI even, I've heard recently. How do you approach it?
Yeah, probably we could do better in how we approach it. It's fairly abstract. We kind of discuss problems as they come up. We notice and try and record which parts of the app, which areas of the app are the most common sources of friction within our development team. That's our kind of primary barometer for where the technical debt is. And then we just try and prioritize it in the context of what fits with our goals for the quarter outside of technical debt. So we're always trying to address some of it and pay it back effectively as we go. But I don't know if we have a really clear, refined system for measuring it as a KPI or having specific goals around technical debt itself.
Well, also your team isn't as big as companies that probably have had to adopt technical debt as a KPI because they have like thousands of engineers, and every day between idea and going live into production is probably millions of dollars in revenue, right? So in your team right now, how many people have you got at Ghost?
34, I think.
34. That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I love seeing the growth of these kind of companies because it gives me hope that good software can still be built. And actually, going back to the bootstrap thing, I think that I shared the vision in our last episode. We had Greg Scown, the one of the founders of Text Expander, and
Cool.
he went really deep in explaining their product strategy and how they really polished and iron out every single detail of the application. And I made the remark that I love products that don't change because it means they work, right? So products like Harvest or Text Expander or Magnet, there are products that are, indie developers have made them, or they're bootstrap companies, and they do change, but they change in the background so that users don't see it, right? Because Greg mentioned that this kind of software leaves a lot on reputation, because otherwise, if the users get pissed, they will go to the next, to the bigger commercial thing, right? And so they have to change a lot of the background stuff, so back-end algorithms and calculations, stuff like that, not reflecting it on the front end. And by doing so, they don't break. These products don't break. I've been using now Ghost for 2 months or three months now. I haven't found any single point of breaking, not a single bug. That's very remarkable. The integrations, connect to Stripe, boom, done. Connect to Cloudflare, boom, done. Everything works seamlessly. I love this kind of experience. I wish more companies would adopt that, but when you take external investment and you have got hundreds of people who are new to the company and they have to push code to production on day one, and they haven't really inherited the good practices of the company, they don't know all of the code base, and they're just freshly arrived into the company, they break things because it's move fast, break things, right? You guys cannot afford that. Have you had any sort of like fuck up that ended up causing reputational damage to Ghost over the years, and the years that perhaps I missed?
Kind of. We had a pretty big fuck up that we sort of suffered from, but it wasn't totally our fuck up. In mid 2020, so we were all kind of locked down, everyone's stressed with COVID and what's going to happen in the world. There was effectively a 0-day vulnerability in SaltStack, which we were using to orchestrate servers in our hosting platform. And SaltStack did a remarkably horrific job of disclosing that there was a vulnerability of any kind whatsoever. I think they, if I remember correctly, they sent one Slack message to a private community the day before the patch was released, and then just didn't tell anyone else there was any vulnerability at all. And so we discovered that this vulnerability had been exploited to install crypto miners on our app servers. Not a good discovery to make. You try and figure out why your CPU is like past 100% and what's going on, only to discover that someone's trying to get that sweet Monero from your very expensive VPS. And so when we discovered this, we reacted very quickly to both patch the vulnerability, verify whether or not it had been exploited in any other way to gain access to our network, reset, basically wiped all credentials of every single user of any kind from all of our database, so that on the next login, users would be forced to do a password reset, only to realize that we didn't have the functionality for wiping credentials and forcing people to do a password reset, so building and deploying that quickly. And then we disclosed that the exploit had happened. Now, the problem was this all happened over a weekend, and we moved very quickly because we're a small team, and we were able to get things resolved very quickly. It was not only us that had suffered this exploit, because SaltStack had done such a terrible job of disclosing it. Essentially, everyone in the world using SaltStack had been infected with the same crypto miner, which effectively blatted the internet looking for open endpoints that it could exploit, and installed itself everywhere it could. But we were the first to disclose. And so what happened was the news cycle was Ghost has been hacked for most of the week. Not SaltStack has a vulnerability, not this is affecting lots and lots of tech companies due to this underlying piece of open source technology that lots of companies are using. It was us in the headlines, as having been hacked. So reputationally, that was not good. I don't know if it probably did cost us some revenue, but it's always difficult to say how much, right? But the lesson there was do the right thing, but do it in the right timing. I think if we had just not been quite so quick to disclose it within kind of 24 hours of it happening, but had just got all our ducks in a row, got everything buttoned up, made sure everything was working again, then it perhaps wouldn't have been quite so extremely focused on us for a solid week of the press cycle.
One thorny thing about running companies that are focused on employee well-being and work-life balance and totally going against the hustle and the grind is that our employees are not supposed to work on the weekend or long shifts like in other companies, right? We're not freaking McKinsey, we're not Deloitte, and our employees take their, of course, the natural time off of the weekends, and then some employees of ours at 2 p.m. they're done because they start 5 p.m. 5 a.m. in the morning, right? But when it comes to working a weekend for an emergency like that, what kind of policies do you have in place to compensate for that? How do you rally the troops?
We have a on-call team and incident management process. So essentially, if there's any downtime or critical emergency, we have a way of notifying team members. And for our on-call engineers, infrastructure team, that's a part of their general job description. There's a rota that we have systems for managing it. And for other team members, we just ask people to help when we need it. And then on the flip side, on the kind of work-life balance side, Ghost actually does a 4-day work week. And we have unlimited time off policy. So we kind of ask everyone to help out when we need it. And we also try and give people, freedom and time off when they need it.
That's amazing. Have you encountered any problem with people? Because we did have unlimited time off in the beginning, but we found out that people were actually not taking holidays. They were not taking days off because the founder team, we were not doing it. So we had to start being really resilient and vocal on working only 40 hours per week, even the founders, right? Because otherwise people were not taking holidays. Did you have any issue with that? Or have you set a minimum of days a year that you have to take off?
Yeah, we set a minimum. We found the same thing. We set a minimum of 2 weeks per year that have to be taken off. And if people haven't taken that off in December, then we close the office at the end of December for the Christmas New Year period. And if people haven't taken it off by then, we kick them out early, effectively.
You ban them from Slack.
Yeah, kind of. I think we've only had to do that maybe once. Because, if you say that, then people are more likely to then just go and book it when it's convenient for them. But yeah, I think that's always a bit of a thing. Is unlimited time off is great, but then if you can take unlimited time off, then you always defer it to later. So it was part of the motivation for switching to a 4-day week was to recognize the kind of intensity of work. I think especially just in quote unquote this day and age, being remote, crossing lots of time zones, having customers everywhere, having incidents that are sometimes out of hours that people have to deal with, and trying to combat that with more of a intentional, conscious break for people every single week, as opposed to only when they happen to have time off booked.
I've been trying to do the 4-day work week, and it ends up on, you have meetings scattered all over the week. I could concentrate in 3 days or 4 only. And then the 5th one, I would dedicate it only to admin work in my house because everything is so accumulated. And then you take this day off, but it ends up you're working on something else. But is there any other disadvantage you've found so far with the 4-day work week? Because this is an experiment that I think we ought to do eventually. Being a services company, it's much more complicated because the clients pay for full weeks and they will not understand for that. But at the same time, I know other agencies are charging for full days of work consisting of 6 hours only instead of 8. So at the end of the day, it kind of like evens out. I don't know, but probably you split the team in 2 and some of them work one half of the week, the other team works the other half of the week and stuff like that. I don't know, what disadvantages have you found with this new approach?
Yeah, I think the what you mentioned about having other work and admin to do is one of the reasons why the 4 day week is valuable. I think everyone has some
Exactly.
version of that, whether it's appointments or shopping or kids events, or just life maintenance, needing to go and, I don't know, do a tax return, talk to an accountant, figure out something with your bank account. And then a lot of those things can't be done on weekends because the place that you need to do the thing is closed, or you just have run out of hours in the day to get to the life admin that is necessary of all of us and is difficult to do alongside um, a fairly intense workflow job. So we use the 4 day week, I think, helps give people space to use that time where they might otherwise feel like they're losing the weekend, which really sucks. So I think that's a big advantage of it. The most significant downside that I think we're still trying to figure out is the context gap between Thursday and Monday is much larger than you would expect compared to the context gap between Friday and Monday, if that makes sense. So having the 3 days off and returning to whatever it was you were doing last week is slower to get up to speed. And conversations that start on a Thursday are difficult to remember. What were we talking about again when you get to Monday morning? Or if something on a Thursday afternoon is not quite done, it's very easy to kick it to Monday, but then suddenly you're at quite a big disadvantage after that big gap of time has passed. So I think the figuring out how to operate efficiently in the 4 days that are available for work becomes much more important. I don't think we're super good at that yet, or we haven't figured it out, got the playbook down just yet. But it's one we've noticed and talked about.
Also, there is not enough data out there explaining correlation between 4 day work weeks and taking less sick days off, or needing less vacations. And maybe people who used to take 3 weeks off in the summer break, now they take only two. There's not enough volume of data, or not enough companies that have implemented it for years, so that the data set is not yet relevant. But I assume there will be something there. I can think that if I am working on a 4 day work week for a year, I will not be burning out so easily. And maybe I don't need to take those long breaks over the summer and stuff like that. But I don't know. That's my observation. I wanted to circle back to the transparency topic. You've done a remarkable job at the sharing the journey of Ghost, the ups and downs, and all the hard things about running this kind of business. In the same vein, Joel from Buffer made something really extraordinary for me a few months back when he shared data openly about the plateau they hit and the loss of revenue they hit 1 year ago, something like that. Because usually building in public is great, but if you notice, most people building in public, they only build in public on the way up. When they go down, they stop building in public, right? They stop sharing metrics, and because that probably causes an accelerated degrowth, perhaps, right? If people see that the business is going down, oh, I might as well change to another platform, right? And Joel shared that, and that was remarkable because not a lot of people will admit hitting a plateau or their numbers going down in public. And I think that's an exercise of responsibility that everybody should do. I understand that publicly traded companies cannot do that. Well, I mean, they have to do that, but they cannot communicate certain things too early in order not to alter the value of the stock and alarm the investors and stuff like that. But more companies that are financially independent should be more open about this kind of data. I found myself that when I shared some stuff not working or some problems we had internally, some fuck ups. I'm very public about our fuck ups as a company, and not only we get a lot of engagement on social media, it's not a metric I really care for, but we get recognition and perhaps better context. We're contacted by people like, oh, look, you shared that was a fuck up, it was great, I learned from that, I want to work with you guys. I don't know if you noticed like a spike in talent or kind of like signups every time you share your data.
Yeah, particularly it's the tried and true indie hacker thing, right? Any tweet with MRR and an MRR chart in it will, by definition, go more viral than one without. Um, I think it's a big advantage as you get going. There's a lot of people who are interested in the founding story, the startup story of anyone. Uh, Something that's just getting going, getting off the ground, what's working, what's not working. It's also quite easy to move the needle on the startup MRR chart in the early days. You do one big new thing and MRR doubles, or there's like a 50% change. I think a lot of people stop sharing revenue, not necessarily when they plateau, but when they just get above a certain size. When you pass around $1 million a year in revenue, sharing revenue metrics, I think, starts to be more of a disadvantage than an advantage. At that point, you've been around for presumably long enough that people kind of already know who you are within the startup space. And you're not small enough anymore to be considered an underdog or like someone to be rooting for because they're just getting going. But you are starting to become a target for competitors, and competitors having insight into your data and your growth rate and what's working, what's not working, as intelligence for what they should do and how they can compete with you becomes an increasing risk. So I can understand why a lot of startups stop sharing revenue as they get to a certain size. At the same time, it's very difficult to influence those metrics in a meaningful way that tells a good story as you get bigger. Any changes I make for the next 6 months, I'll be lucky if it moves the needle by 10%, which is just not nearly as much of an interesting story. But in the context of Ghost, we are very committed to the transparency piece, in part because it aligns so much with the ethos of the open source projects as well as the nonprofit foundation. I think transparency goes hand in hand with both of those. But I do think you have to be mindful of the way in which you do it and the reasons for why you're doing it. For us, the reasons are that it's aligned with the project and the structure. For other people, the reasons they do it are for marketing and because they want to get attention. But I don't necessarily think everyone should share metrics always, and it's always good. I think you should have a goal in mind for why you're doing it, and then measure against it. But to your point, undoubtedly, it's something that we hear is a strong signal when it comes to hiring team members. Something that they like, something that they appreciate, like the transparency and the rest of the structure of Ghost is a huge pull for us being able to attract talent to work here. And it's a big pull for customers who have at various points had the rug pulled out from under them from other tech companies that start up, shut down. They have no idea if they're doing well or poorly, or if they're running out of money or need to raise more. In them being able to trust that we're going to stick around and we're doing okay, and they can invest their time and energy into building on top of Ghost without the fear that it's going to sell to Yahoo next year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, on the building in public for indie hackers, there's a lot of upside. There's literally no downside to saying, "Oh, we're doing 2,000 euros in MRR in our first month or year, something like that." There's no downside to that. I have never set the limit from which it is dangerous or calculated risk. 1 million in AR makes sense. For another reason that doesn't apply to you guys, which is you will never sell your company. But when you're sharing your data publicly, you're also sharing your valuation, your potential sale price, right? So
Yeah.
that's some kind of numbers they can use to negotiate against your asking price. And so it doesn't apply to you, but you have to take it into consideration if you have another kind of company structure. The other question I had for you, with regards to communication and style, because this is one of my personal struggles, is by having this transparency core value in the company. Where do you set the line in transparency, right? Over communication versus under communication. What's the right timing to communicate? Oh, look, guys, in 3 months we'll have no projects for everybody. You better start looking for another job. Or you're going to overcome that situation, so you just don't share beforehand, so that you don't create an internal sense of alarm and an emergency in the company, right? How to set a protocol for that and a standard in communication, especially not of bad things, but of preparing people for potential bad things that might happen. When there was COVID hit, potentially we could lose all our clients. Didn't happen, but it could have happened. Other companies shut down. In the last 24 months, most boutique agencies like ours have either shut down or sold to other companies at a discount because they were doing very poorly. And so our employees shared the concern like, hey, everybody is doing poorly. How are we doing? Oh, well, we're doing great. But I have to let you know that this is happening out there. It's very cold out there. Salaries are going down. There's a lot of there's layoff season and stuff like that. But I don't know. Like, I don't know if you got the recipe for that, or because you look very calm and very thoughtful about everything you say. It looks like it's pretty calculated every time you share it. But I don't know if you also internally struggle with this.
Uh, Yeah, I guess I kind of think about this in the context of we try and share as much data with the team as possible, particularly data that will help them be able to do their jobs more easily. So on day one, when someone joins Ghost, they get full unlimited access to our revenue analytics that they can dig through the entire thing, every single metric that we have, performance over the last 10 years, and see how the company has performed. And it serves two functions. One, it kind of sets everyone's mind at ease about how we're doing, like how are things going? Are we flatlining? Are we going down? Are we going up? You just take away that whole category of questions. Because in reality, if your team are worried about that, if they're thinking about that, then it's going to be difficult for them to be productive on what you hope it is that they're working on. So you potentially could be wasting energy in that area when you don't need to. Another thing is they can see the effects of their work. If they launch something or work on something, they can see like, did the numbers go up? Did they stay the same? Or if they have a theory about a segment of customers, like we think business customers who are all asking for this new feature are growing faster than the other customers and we need to devote more resources to them. If they have access to the data to go and validate that and look at the segment of those customers and how they're performing and what they're doing, then they can make better decisions in product development. So we try and open up as many things as we can, unless there's a really clear reason not to. We essentially default to everyone can see everything, unless there's a particular reason of some kind, legal compliance or otherwise, that they shouldn't be able to. And then when it comes to, signaling bad news or talking about potential disadvantages that are coming up, we do our best. When the team was really small, we did, a weekly all hands, and we just talked openly about everything with everyone. Now we have, a multitude of teams working on different things, different priorities. A weekly cadence would probably be more distracting than helpful. So we do a big all hands every quarter now. A big all hands every month, and then that includes a strategic kind of planning session and bigger picture view every quarter. And that's the place where we bring up any things that as a company we feel like we're struggling with, risks that are potentially on the horizon, and then open it up for anyone who has feedback or questions to talk about it. And then we do the same thing in person once a year on our team meetups, which is always a good venue for bringing, if there are difficult topics that need to come up around company performance or like how we're doing or whether we're working well together or there's room for improvement or people are frustrated perhaps with processes or systems that aren't good. One of the biggest downsides of remote is empathy doesn't translate particularly well through 2D Zoom calls. Being in person makes it a lot easier to have those conversations. There's just much more of a human element to it. So we try and always create space for those things to come up when we're sitting together, hanging out in person, and that always is a good reset or a good place to do those types of things.
Good. And to wrap up the topic of transparency, I wanted to ask, because before you share a tech fuck up that was probably somebody else's fault, do you have any personal fuck up that you've done in the company that have resulted in some kind of like financial? In other words, what's been your most expensive fuck up at Ghost? It has to be yours.
Yeah, I've had plenty.
It's a signature question of the podcast. So
yeah, I've had tons. It's just difficult to pick one. I don't know. Yeah, you could probably tie this back to revenue somehow, but it's a difficult one. I once managed to get our entire website banned from Google for, it might have been 2 months.
oh wow.
Which is pretty fucking bad. So what happened was we were getting inundated with spam. So this enterprising SEO agency in Malaysia had decided that they were going to exploit Ghost's free trial system. So you could sign up for a free trial, which would give you a website, and then they would put loads of porn on the website and try and use that for SEO. I'm not entirely sure what the motivation was, but maybe it was an SEO agency working for a porn company. It's not entirely clear. In any event, we were like a 5-person company. I think this was 2014 or 15, and the resources that they were using up with this automated spam, was intense. Like, it was costing money. It was making servers go down because of the level to which they were doing it. And so eventually, how did I do it? I found through some source code, I can't remember. I found the agency in Malaysia. I called them up 2 a.m. in the morning their time. I clearly woke some dude up, presumably the owner of the agency, and I said, please, can you stop spamming us? We need this to end. And I'm trying to remember the sequence of events here. I think he sort of said he would, and then he didn't. In any event, we had a big influx of requests, spam requests, and again, one day, and we were going through the server logs. I was looking through Cloudflare, and there was a big influx from this IP that was Google, like Google Cloud Platform. So he blocks that whole IP range, like no more VPS spamming our servers for you. Anyway, to cut a long story short, that wasn't Google Cloud Platform. It was Google Web Crawler trying to index our site, who had just been banned from absolutely everything. So it wasn't until, I don't know, a month later or something, when I Googled something in our docs, that nothing came up. And I thought, that's strange. That always comes up. And then I realized that none of ghost.org was coming up. And then I realized that we were no longer ranking for a single thing whatsoever. And that was entirely on me and a hasty click in a Cloudflare dashboard. Fortunately, it recovered just fine.
Great. Well, thank you for doing this, because actually we need more examples of that. People think that other companies work perfectly and seamlessly, while our personal projects are always like shit. But I think we make a pretty good job at democratizing failure in this sense. Look, I was worried because I had another blog topic that was how to, more like product strategy and stuff. We will not be covering this because we're running out of time. And one of the key questions there was like, I haven't found the formula to sort of resell Ghost as an agency, because for me, it looks like a very good platform to build projects on. But there are certain things that you guys are so opinionated on, like the multi-language support natively, or not adding content blocks and stuff like that, that other platforms use it. And you guys have got very legit reasons not to give them out of the box. And so I was going to go into that, but I think from this answer you just given me, I've inferred how not to use Ghost, which I think it's as valuable, if not more. So, well, let's just wrap it here, because you've been extremely generous with your time. I'm rolling out the carpet for you. You got 1 minute left to say how we can help you, how we can help Ghost, and any announcements or anything you want to share with our community.
Love the Hot Ones reference. Yeah. If you want to check out Ghost,
the first one to get it. Yes.
I would, if you publish online and you have an email list or you have thoughts to share with the world, check out ghost.org. We're doing a lot of interesting things. The most interesting of which that is coming up, that is kind of on the horizon, is ActivityPub-based federation. So soon, all Ghost sites in the world will be networked with one another through decentralized protocols that will give you a social graph inside an independent website. So you'll be able to like, reply, and interact with other publishers and audience out there in the big wide social web, which is very exciting. We've been working on this in beta for a few months, and it completely changes the shape of the product in a way that I think in the next year or two is going to be pretty transformational. So that's one of the fun things we're working on. And yeah, love it. If anyone wanted to check out the platform, shoot me a message on any of the social platforms at John O'Nolan if you have questions or want to chat.
I totally endorse that as a personal user. And before you go, you got it coming. Favorite Hot Ones episode so far?
I mean, the DJ Khaled's always a classic, right? Just for its incredible failure. What was the one I watched just last week? Oh, Ryan Reynolds. That one was really good.
Yeah, that's very good.
There's a few. I'm struggling to think of them all on the spot. Jimmy Fallon is the one I just watched. He was very funny. What's yours?
Shaquille O'Neal, probably. Like, I don't understand him most of the time we're speaking, but the faces and the entire performance is superb. That for me is like a all-time great. Ricky Gervais.
The Gordon Ramsay one was good as well,
one.
Just because of Gordon Ramsay, because of how angry he got throughout the whole thing. Like, why do you do this?
Exactly. They're really good ones. And then I'm really surprised by people who you wouldn't expect it, but they tolerate spiciness so well. Like Charlize Theron, for instance. And I'm surprised.
Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are like, yeah, spicy, but I'm like, holy fuck. Like I have the bomb I have it in my fridge. It's like literally unbearable, stuff like that. I love spicy, and that's why I buy all of these terrible sauces. And when I see some of the guests that they don't break a sweat, I'm like, no, I don't know how they can do it. But anyways,
I'm a big John. Hot sauce fan.
Yeah, love having you on, and congratulations on what you've built. Much success for the future, and also thanks for getting the Hot Ones reference first person in 150 episodes so far that gets it. So
amazing. I'll take that. Thank you, Àlex.
Thank you very much.